Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to put together a short video in celebration of Pride Month. So in adult fantasy, I think we have been doing a lot better over the last couple of decades of creating stories that are really inclusive, that are highlighting people of different experiences and different backgrounds. I think YA has definitely soared above adult fantasy in this fashion. I think that there is a lot of inclusivity there. I read a lot of really great contemporary YA and YA fantasy that includes a variety of cultural backgrounds, a variety of sexual or gender identities. But I do think that that is starting to move forward in a very positive way in adult fantasy as well. That doesn't mean that there isn't still room to grow and room to include a more diverse array of voices. But what I want to do with this video is to celebrate some of those stories in honor of Pride Month. So I think most of these selections are own voices, but not all of them. So if you have any suggestions, any adult fantasy recommendations that feature LGBTQ plus protagonists, main characters, secondary characters, or if you have any own voices suggestions, then please feel free to leave those in the comments below. There are a bunch of books that I could have included in this video, but I really wanted to talk about the books that I really love. I'm going to talk about 5. So there's 4 books that I really love, and there's one book that I didn't love as much, but everybody else seems to love. So I still want to recommend it because I very much think that it is a me thing and not anything to do with the book. Before we get started, I just want to pop 2 titles up on the screen. I'm not going to talk about them today because I feel like I talk about them in almost every single video, but I still want to recommend them because they are some of my favorite books and they feature LGBTQ plus protagonists that I think are amongst some of the very best. And one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. One of my favorite books of all time, a beautiful story, beautiful writing. If you haven't read it, then just read it. That's all I'm going to say. And the second one is Swordspoint by Kushner, which I've talked about a lot. This is a fantasy only in that it takes place in an alternate universe. It is a comedy of manners is the way that it's described, and it is the story of an expert swordsman named Richard St. Vere, and he is a bisexual man in a relationship with another man. And that is very much just an accepted fact in the book, and what the book is actually focused on is more of the court, I won't call it political intrigue because not a lot of it has to do with politics. It's mostly personal intrigue and kind of petty actions and reactions from the various members at court. But both those books are phenomenal. I love them. If you haven't picked them up, then this is a great month to do so. However, I will get into the books that I do want to talk about for the video. And like I said, there are 5 that I want to review today. So the very first is, I'm going to talk about it in terms of a duology, and those are the books Greenwode and Shirewode by Tullos Henning. I have talked about these a little bit on the channel. These are actually books that are part of a longer series. So this is a 5-book series that is a retelling. It's a historical fantasy that focuses on the story of Robin Hood. I love historical fantasy. I love retellings in that vein. I really love Arthurian legend, and this Robin Hood retelling is fantastic. The first 2 books, I think, are of a higher quality than the final 3 books. I think they all came out in very quick succession, and part of me wonders if the first 2 were more intricately plotted, planned for, written, and then the final 3 were perhaps written a little bit more quickly. That may not be the case. That's just my own speculation, but I think that the first 2 can stand very much as a duology. The second one has a very satisfying ending. It's open-ended, but in a satisfying way where you see a conclusion of the arcs for all of the main characters. And this book is, like I said, it is a Robin Hood retelling, and instead of Robin Hood seeking the hand of the fair maid Marian, I need to slow down, Marian is actually his sister. So Robin and Marian are brother and sister. They are the son and the daughter of a forester and a wart witch. So their mom is just one of those kind of traditional healers that you find a lot in historical fantasy. and Robin develops a friendship with a young boy named Gamelin, who is the son of a nobleman. And it's this friendship that grows between Robin and Gamelin and kind of grows from friendship into something else that provides kind of the meat of the story. We see the story unfold between the two of them, and they come from very different backgrounds, very different perspectives. And through their relationship and the way that they interact with each other, we also get a sense of what Britain is like at this time. So we have Robin, who stands for everything that is wild and untamed, that pagan magic that is still very much alive in the countryside. And through Gamelin, we see that more steadfast Christian perspective, the signs of progress, the hopes and aspirations that the nobility have for the country, and the way that they will use the peasantry in order to attain those goals. I think that the writing in this series is very beautiful. It's very immersive. In the first chapter, I knew that this was going to be a series that I really liked because I really enjoyed the way that Henning made the writing style and her world building fit the type of story that she was trying to put together. These two books are very romance heavy, so if you do not like fantasy romance, then I would not recommend this for you. But if you enjoy fantasy romance, if you like historical fantasy, and if you're looking for a really underrated couple of books to read for Pride Month, then I would certainly encourage you to give these a try. The second book that I want to talk about is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the first book in a new series by her and is the first book that I have ever read by this author. I listened to the audiobook, which I don't do for fiction very often, but I have to say that it was really enjoyable. So if you are someone who likes listening to audiobooks, then I thought this one was really quite good. The plot here is that this is a multi-POV fantasy story. It is based in the pre-Columbian Americas. And it follows three main characters. And the first is Narumpa, who is a priestess who has kind of risen from poverty up to the very highest echelons of society. Then we have Serapio, who is a young boy who has been molded into something more, is all I'll say, by the people in his life. He has had a very difficult upbringing. He has been treated very harshly and, like I said, molded into this creation that other people feel that he should be in order to attain a grand destiny. And then the third character that we have is Shiala, who is a Teak, which is a race that exists in this story, and she is a sea captain who somehow has the ability to calm the sea and calm the waves. So as we move along this book, we're moving toward an event known as the Convergence, which is going to be essentially a solar eclipse. And each chapter starts with the number of days that you have left until we reach this convergence. And just as there is this kind of natural convergence occurring, we also have a convergence of the main characters in our books. We can see that their stories are slowly starting to come together. Some come together a little bit more quickly than others, but we can see that they're all headed on this kind of collision course, and you're really unsure of what's going to happen. This was totally unlike any typical fantasy that I read. There were aspects of the occult here, there were ritualistic aspects, it's kind of a blend of historical fantasy, there is seafaring fantasy. It's really a great jumble of fantasy subgenres here. And I think that Rebecca Roanhorse carried it out very well. It is quite a short novel, and I think one of the common complaints that I heard is that people felt like just as the action was starting to build is when you get this huge climax at the end and then the book is over. I didn't feel that way personally. I really liked watching all of the main characters' stories unfold. I really liked the characters, and Rebecca Roanhorse had quite the diverse array of characters in terms of sexual identity, gender identity, cultural differences. She has really, I think, done a great job in a short number of pages of building up the various cultures of this land and showing us how the various peoples interact with each other, what they think of each other, and how those beliefs may be erroneous, that they may be based on prejudice, they may be based on a lack of understanding. So I thought it was a phenomenal first novel. When I rated it on Goodreads last year, I gave it a 4.5 stars out of 5. I really liked it. It appealed to a lot of the things that I enjoy in fantasy, and I think that it's a great selection to read this month if you're looking to add a little bit of diversity to your TBR. The third book I want to talk about is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. I don't feel like I need to say a lot about this book because it was everywhere last year on BookTube. But essentially the setup for this is a standalone fantasy novel, which is always fantastic. And the setup is that there is a young woman named Addie Larue who was born, I think, in the 15th century in France. And she makes a deal with the devil that comes out after dark in order to save herself from a stifling fate as a woman who kind of has no agency, no ability to choose what she wants in life. So she has this arranged marriage that she doesn't want to enter into, and so in desperation she prays to the gods that come out after dark, which her her mentor has told her never to do because you don't know what's going to happen. And when this god appears before her, he asks her what she would like, and she makes a wish for the future and basically gets caught in this kind of curse from this god. And her curse is that she can live forever, so she gets the freedom that she was so desperately seeking, but she cannot make an impact on anyone else's life. So as soon as people turn away from Addie, they forget her. She cannot write anything down. She cannot make art. She cannot create things. And I thought that this was really fascinating in terms of exploring themes. When I read it last year, I read it back to back with The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which is a very similar kind of Faustian tale. It has a very similar setup, and the execution is quite different. And it was really interesting because I really love the play Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. So when I was reading, I was kind of comparing Dr. Faustus with Dorian Gray, with Addie Larue. And I really enjoyed watching how this type of story, because they are all the same type of story, but I enjoyed seeing how they differed based on the century in which they were written. Addie Larue, which came out last year in 2020, is a book about not being able to make an impact, which I thought was really interesting in a world where we record everything. We can't do anything without uploading a picture, uploading a video. We want people to see us. We want to be remembered in that way. So to have Addie's curse be that she cannot leave any sort of impact, I felt that that was very appropriate for this generation. And I really enjoyed reading it through that lens. So I would encourage you to pick up Addie Larue. The main character is pansexual, which is where the representation comes in. But I would certainly encourage you to pick that up. And if you haven't read Dorian Gray, if you haven't read the play Dr. Faustus, then read them together. It's really fun. I think that that makes for a really interesting reading experience and adds some depth to the novel and to the overall experience of reading the book. Selection number 4 is another book that I read last year, and I did also listen to this one via audiobook actually, and that is How You Lose the Time War. So this is a very interesting piece of science fiction, or we could call it science fantasy, because there is some blending of science fiction and fantasy elements here. It's very short and very abstract, so I don't want to say too much. But the main premise is that we have two characters known as Red and Blue, and they are on opposite sides of this epic time war. And at the beginning of the novel, we see one of them opening a letter from the other. And as they open this letter, they start to engage in this kind of cross-time relationship in which they are communicating with each other unbeknownst to their commanding officers or to their separate teams on the opposite side of this war. And they start to build a relationship and really get to know each other and appreciate each other and fall in love with each other through these letters and through the small manipulations of time that they make. And it is, as I said, it is very abstract. It is highly stylized. So this will be for a particular sort of reader. But I loved it. I thought that it was very clever. It took a little bit to get adjusted, so to get into it. But if you're looking for something that structurally is unlike anything else that you have read, that has some truly poetic language, and that has a love story that is not in any way saccharine, that is not in any way melodramatic. It is just a beautiful story. It is science fiction written in a way that I feel is really unique. And this is so short. You could listen to it as an audiobook or read it yourself. It would take no more than a couple of hours. And I think that it is really worth checking out. Even if you hate it, it didn't take very much time away from kind of reading the other things on your TBR. So I would highly, highly recommend this one. And that brings us to the fifth and final recommendation. So this is the book that I personally liked but didn't love, but everybody else seems to love. And because we could all use a little bit of happiness, a little bit of that kind of warm, fuzzy feeling, I felt like I should recommend it anyway. And that is The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. So this is a book that follows our main character of Linus, who is a social worker who takes on cases of children who have magical abilities. So he's kind of like a magical children caseworker. And he is assigned the case of Arthur Parnassus, who runs his orphanage on the coast. And he is the caretaker of children who have kind of been labeled unhelpable or unsavable. These are the most dangerous children that they could find. And so he is the surrogate father, caretaker for these children. And Linus is sent to his home to see if he is doing a good job or if he is putting these children in danger or the greater world at danger because he is unable to properly watch over these kids. And what happens is a very character-driven novel where we get to know each of these kids who are all very unique. They all have their own struggles, but they're all really delightful to follow. And we also watch the budding romance between Arthur and Linus and how that affects what happens in the story. This is, and I think that the issue that I have with this book is that I do not connect with T.J. Klune's sense of humor. I find humor in writing to be very hit or miss. I have a very specific sense of humor, and a lot of things don't really land for me. And there's a lot of really exaggerated, over-the-top humor here that a lot of people really like, but that I didn't love. I felt like it was also, it kind of straddled the line between a character-driven fantasy novel and a romance. And I felt like it didn't lean heavily enough in one direction or the other. I felt like the plot was not, it was quite predictable, but I also didn't get as much as I wanted out of the other elements of the story. So it just didn't completely work for me. That being said, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I thought that it was a very kind of warm and fuzzy read. I really liked some of the children who were depicted in this book. But it is kind of universally acclaimed. It is a 5-star read for so many people. People find it to be heartwarming, to bring them nothing but joy and happiness. And honestly, who couldn't use a little bit more of that on a day-to-day basis? So if the setup sounds like something that you would like, if you're looking for something kind of cozy and fuzzy and really easy to flip through because it is really quick, then this would be a great book to pick up this month. If you are doing the Olympic readathon, this is an amazing found family selection, and it's so fast to read that you will definitely be able to rack up some points for your team really quickly. But those are my 5 recommendations, plus 2 bonuses that I couldn't help but sneak in there, for inclusive, diverse reads to take in, to read this Pride Month. Like I said, if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I will see you with another video soon. Bye!